All right. Hello and welcome back. A little bit stuffy here. My goodness. In this video, we're going to talk about overfunctioning. And as we talk about overfunctioning, I also want to talk about the word delusion. What is a delusion? I mean this in the technical meaning of the term, and I have fit this description in my own past, so there's no judgment here. Delusion is when we believe something about reality that is not true in reality. And of course, everybody to some degree is a little bit delusional, but obviously there are people who believe totally different things about reality. There's people who believe that the flying spaghetti monster lives in the clouds. Okay, so delusions can be larger or smaller. Now, the when a delusion is a problem in your life from a psychological perspective is when it has a negative impact on your ability to function. When you cannot function, like if you're burning out, it means that there was something you thought was accurate that you acted on, and it turned out not to be accurate, and now we're having a very hard time functioning. Okay, and again, I've experienced this. Okay, so the delusion is I thought reality was one way, and if I acted and interacted with reality in one way, it would reward me. God would reward me, and it turns out that didn't happen. Okay, so what that means is there is a belief that is not grounded in reality somewhere in our mind. Okay, and so what is the delusional belief? So now let's go to overfunctioning. Now that we understand what delusion is, because God blesses us and rewards us when we act and interact with creation in the way he designed us to. And we're not rewarded, I think many times, not even miraculously, just through natural cause and effect consequences that God worked into the world. We are rewarded or not rewarded based on the way in which we engage with his creation. Okay, so over functioning, let's go back to our analogy of our budget. If it costs $5,000 a month to live, and you can set that into whatever price terms is relevant for you and your country and wherever you are. I happen to live in like one of the most expensive places in the world, so I don't know what other people live on, but it's kind of obnoxious. But let's say it's $5,000 a month to live or run your ministry or whatever it is, and you only make three. The delusion is the belief that you can sustain $5,000 a month. That is a delusional belief. If you have only 3,000 and you do not have any access to any other actual streams of income that you own, you cannot sustain $5,000 a month. And there is no way to get around it. Now, what do we try to do? We try to get around it. Okay, now, let's just say this. Is it possible to increase your income and get from 3 to 5? Yeah, sure. Is it possible to increase tithes or to, let's just say from an energy perspective, let's say, you're struggling and you're overweight or you're unhealthy and you're just finding you don't have enough energy to get through the day, right? The day is demanding more energy than you have. And you know that you've got to work on your physical fitness, which, I can relate to. I sit in an office chair all day. I really try to work on the physical fitness side. But let's just say, that's the case. Can you go and start working out and start eating healthier and have more energy to get through the day? Yeah, of course you can. That's not going to happen now, though, right? That takes time to see the fruit from those efforts. So right now, what do you have? You either have 5,000 a month or you do not have 5,000 resources. It doesn't even have to be dollars, but I guess in this example it is. You have 5,000 or you don't. And if you don't have 5,000 and you try to get to 5,000 when you cannot, that is firstly delusional, and it requires you to overfunction. And when you overfunction, that extra 2,000 has to come from somewhere. Okay, now I love being a high performer. I want to high perform with my family. I want to be there for my kids. Yesterday, I was filming a video and it was a little bit after time for work. And my son's like, hey, can you play Legos with me? And it was in my head. It's like, ah. And I'm like, How am I gonna be filming these courses and not be prioritizing my kids? Like, yeah, of course. All right, I'm coming. But I want to perform high with my family, and I want to have a high performance ministry, business ministry, whatever you want to call it. And I want to balance those things. I want to have a high performance relationship with God. And I just mean that by like, I'm not performing for God, but I'm doing what I can to relate and have relationship with God to the best of my ability. Right. And I'm doing that with him. So this isn't all on me, but I'm not making excuses. I want to do that. And also, I still have limitations and there's still only so much I can do. And I have to understand that. And so when we try to go from the 3,000 to the 5,000, it's got to come from somewhere. If I'm going to overfunction at my job here, hanging out with you, it's got to come from somewhere. I want to get stuff done. I want to get more courses out. I want to build the platform. And if I overperform here, it's going to come out of the time with my kids and my wife. And I will have to have a conversation one day when I meet Jesus where that bill will come due, probably in this life, where it's like I don't have a relationship with my wife and kids. Like that, it has to come from somewhere, and there's no other way around it. And so the question is if you want to overperform, are you willing to pay the price that is going to be required? And I think that this is so evident, at least in the US, when we've got a lot of pastors. There's a word for pastors' kids. It's a PK. They're called PKs. And everybody knows PKs are crazy. I have had a lot of good friends in my past who were pastors' kids. And they had a lot of problems because dad's never around. Mom raised him by himself because what's he doing? He's doing the Lord's work and he's sacrificing for the kingdom and doing what? Over functioning in the church and under functioning at home. Okay, so when we overfunction, it cannot come from now. It has to come from somewhere. If you take out a credit card and you spend it today, it comes out of your future and you show up one day and the bill comes due. It always comes due. Okay, so when you overfunction, you can catch up for a little while. Business leaders do this all the time. I have read, I can't remember which book it was, but a business leader wrote a book and talked about basically how he slept like 3 hours a day. He was the best. He was the best for like 20 years. And then he just had this crazy health crisis and he was in the ER, he's in the hospital. He's like got these serious issues. And the doctor is like, what have you been doing to yourself? He's like, if you don't 100% stop everything you're doing, you're going to die. You have to start taking care of yourself right now. And the guy who I can't remember, powerful CEO running, billions of dollars, he quit everything and went and lived in the mountains by himself for 5 years to get his life and his body back on track because he pushed it. He overfunctioned so long that it almost cost him his life. Okay, so you can overfunction, but the bill will come due. Now, so overfunctioning leads to burnout. So step one is overfunctioning. Step two is burnout. And we overfunction because we are expending resources faster than we have them. Now, I want to give an example of how this happens. I think, obviously, I work with a lot of pastors and ministry leaders. And so here's the way I see this in my consulting. Okay. Is we've got, well, I'll give an example with a specific church. It's a multi-site I guess, mega church. It's a multi-site campus. They have 6 different campuses. They have a homeless campus for homeless, all this. And they're a big event church. So you have a pastor for each campus, and that pastor is supposed to be growing that campus. And so they grow it, January, February, March, whatever. And Easter comes around. And then all of the pastors and all of the campuses are pulled into the main campus to plan this huge, giant Easter event for the whole area. And all the campuses attend to the center campus. Well, the problem is these events are so big, it takes a month to plan these things with all of the pastors, which is just nuts. Because now, at this point in time, while they're planning Easter, they have to not only plan the event, set up the event, but they have to also run their own church. So now they're doing double time. They don't get paid anymore. They just have extra stuff that they cannot sustain. And I know they can't sustain it because I'm personal friends with multiple pastors at this ministry. They cannot sustain both. And then what happens? People stop coming to the ministry, right? People start phasing out because, like, well, I don't know, the pastor's not even around, and the services are sort of inconsistent, and it doesn't really seem like this is really put together. And so people start to dwindle out of the ministry. So by the time pastor comes back after Easter, the numbers have dropped. And then what happens? The central campus comes back and holds them accountable for the drop in attendance. Well, why is your attendance dropping? Well, what do you mean, the correct answer is the requirement to do more than I can do is delusional, and this is impossible, and I can't do what you want me to do. Of course, you can't say that. So what happens? They say, oh, yeah, okay, sure. And then what do? Overfunction. Their expenses are higher than the resources that they have to give in ministry. And then it gets even worse toward the end of the year when you've got Thanksgiving and you've got Christmas and you've got all these other holidays. They spend 4 months at the end of the year doing that exact same thing that I just told you. They're trying to manage a whole church, which by itself is a lot. And then they're doing event planning nonstop. They also have all of these other like missions events and I don't know, like a whole bunch of other stuff that happens through whatever congregation they're through. And so they are totally exhausted. And then January rolls around, they got to do it again. So this is exactly what overfunctioning is. And then ministry leaders don't understand why burnout snuck up on them. Well, we're doing the Lord's work. We're doing everything we're supposed to be doing. No, you're doing too much stuff and you don't have the cash to pay for the bill. Now, here is the further and even more insidious effect of this on ministries and businesses is when you do this, the pastors can't sustain it. Well, it has to go somewhere. So then what? The pastor has to go get more help. Well, we're going to get some volunteers. And the way that sounds is nice. Well, just people with good hearts who want to serve the Lord alongside us. That's not the way it works out in reality. When the pastor has no choice or feels, because if there's only one pastor and the pastor has too many things going on, he feels he has no choice but to do all these things. Then what does he do? He has to go and tell people, I need your help and I cannot do it without you. So you have to show up and you have to sacrifice for the Lord with me. Well, what does that do? That makes volunteers feel taken advantage of. And over time, we get the issue of volunteer burnout because pastor isn't looking out for the needs of the volunteers. He's not training them and teaching them and discipling them. No, he's like, I literally don't have time to take out the trash on Sunday and I need someone to do it for me. So you take it out. And he hands them a trash bag. And it's like, what? Oh, okay. I guess I'll do it this week. And then 6 months later, they're still having the trash bag shoved in their hand. And they're like, man, this stinks. And this is how burnout happens because we are expending too many resources that we do not have to spend, and then the bill comes due. So first is what happens is we overspend the budget. And then in a delusional belief that we can maintain that amount of spend, it is not sustainable. That's why this whole section is on sustainability. It's so important. You have to consider the cost of building the tower. If you're spending more than you have, you cannot sustain the cost and you have to cut. But we don't do that because we have a delusional belief that if we just sacrifice for the Lord, we can carry the cost. And then what happens? We carry the cost and take it from the future and right? We overfunction and we borrow from the future. And then one day we show up and we're totally burnt out. And that's when we get surprised. That is the full process of burnout. Okay. So with that, I will see you in the next video where we're going to continue. God bless.